Okay, so Bitcoin. It's kind of unavoidable these days, right? But specifically, we got to talk about this prediction we keep seeing everywhere. $200,000 by 2025. I mean, come on. Is that for
But
real?
what's interesting here isn't just the number itself, it's who's saying it. We're not talking about, some random online personality. This is coming from a respected figure in traditional banking.
Right, and that's what we're diving into today, because it feels different this time. Like, is this finally the moment when Bitcoin goes from, I don't know, kind of fringe to being taken seriously by the big players?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Or should I say the $200,000 question? But seriously, what we're seeing is a potential shift in how the financial establishment views Bitcoin. It's no longer being dismissed as just some, internet fad.
So for those of us who, like, maybe haven't bought any Bitcoin yet, why should we even care?
Because even if you never buy a single Bitcoin, this potential shift has ripple effects that could impact all of us.
Okay, so let's break it down. This $200,000 prediction.
Right, so this prediction, it's based on a few key factors, and one of the biggest ones is institutional adoption.
Okay, institutional adoption. That sounds kind of jargony. What does that actually mean?
Basically, it means big players like hedge funds, asset managers, even pension funds. They're starting to invest in Bitcoin.
Really? Like, seriously?
Seriously, and they're doing it in a way that's familiar to them through ETFs.
ETFs.
Yeah, exchange-traded funds.
Okay, explain it to me like I'm 5.
So imagine a basket of assets you can invest in, all packaged together neatly. In this case, that basket holds Bitcoin. ETFs are familiar to institutional investors. They're regulated. It fits within their existing systems.
So it's like a way for them to dip their toes in the Bitcoin pool without, like, making a huge splash and scaring off their more traditional clients.
Exactly. And even though it might seem like a small step, the amount of money these institutions are pouring in is massive.
We're talking billions, right?
Billions with a B.
Wow.
And one of the biggest names in the game is BlackRock,
BlackRock, like the BlackRock.
the one and only. They manage trillions of dollars. And they just launched a Bitcoin ETF.
Okay, now that's a big deal.
It is, because it signals to the rest of the financial world that Bitcoin is here to stay.
So all this institutional money flowing in, how might that actually affect, us regular folks?
That's where things get really interesting, because this isn't just about the price of Bitcoin going up or down. It's about what that price signal represents. Growing acceptance, legitimacy.
Okay, bigger picture stuff. But before we go there, there's this other elephant in the room, right? The 2024 election. Does that throw a wrench in all this?
It's definitely a factor. But here's the thing about Bitcoin. One of its core principles is decentralization. No single government controls it.
So even if a candidate who hates Bitcoin wins.
It's not like they can just shut it down.
Exactly.
Exactly. However, the election does highlight a growing public sentiment, a potential shift in how people view traditional financial systems, especially with things like inflation being top of mind.
Which brings us to a real-world example of this shift in action. El Salvador. They went all in on Bitcoin, making it legal tender. Definitely a bold move. I mean, some people are calling it visionary. Others are saying it's a disaster waiting to happen.
It's definitely been a roller coaster. But love it or hate it, El Salvador's move has provided valuable insights into what wider adoption could look like, especially in emerging markets.
Okay, so we've got institutional money pouring in, an election that could reflect broader anxieties about the current financial system, and a country using Bitcoin to, like, buy groceries. That's a lot to unpack. Before we dive deeper into El Salvador and what it all means for you, let's take a quick pause. Hey, we're back. So before the break, we were talking about El Salvador, that whole Bitcoin country thing. It's been a minute since they took the leap, like 3 years now? Have we learned anything interesting, or is it still too early to tell?
Oh, we've learned a ton. El Salvador's experiment, love it or hate it, it's given us a glimpse into what wider Bitcoin adoption could actually look like in the real world, especially in emerging markets.
Okay, so what have we learned?
Well, for one, Bitcoin has the potential to really shake things up when it comes to sending money across borders.
You mean remittances?
Exactly. Think about it. A lot of developing nations rely heavily on money being sent back home by citizens working abroad, right? But those traditional transfer services, they can charge some hefty fees. It can take days for the money to arrive. And for some folks, even accessing those services can be a challenge.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So Bitcoin swoops in with the promise of faster, cheaper transactions.
Exactly. And in a place like El Salvador, where a significant portion of the population relies on those remittances, that can be a game changer.
So it's about like giving people more control over their own money, especially in places where traditional banking might be, I don't know, inaccessible or unreliable.
You got it. Now, it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows in El Salvador. There have definitely been some challenges.
Yeah, I was going to say Bitcoin's price is like notoriously volatile,
Yeah.
not exactly ideal when you're trying to buy groceries.
Exactly. That's been a big one. But the thing is, even with those bumps in the road, El Salvador has forced the world to pay attention.
So whether you're a Bitcoin believer or a skeptic,
El Salvador has sparked a global conversation about financial alternatives.
and I'm guessing that conversation is only getting louder with all this institutional money pouring in.
Oh, absolutely. These big players are seeing the same potential that drew El Salvador to Bitcoin in the first place. They're looking at emerging markets and seeing a huge opportunity.
So it's not just about El Salvador anymore. It's about a global shift in thinking about how money works and who it works for.
Exactly. And that's something that should matter to everyone, whether you own Bitcoin or not.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. We've got institutional money pouring in. An election here in the U.S. that could reflect some anxieties about the existing financial system. And countries like El Salvador experimenting with Bitcoin as like a potential solution. It's a lot to process. For the person listening who might be thinking, this is all well and good, but I just want to know if my retirement savings are safe. How does this all connect?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because here's the thing. Even if you never buy a single Bitcoin, this growing acceptance, this momentum we're seeing, it has the potential to reshape the entire financial landscape as we know it.
So what you're saying is this isn't just about some magic internet money going up or down. It's about a potential change in how we think about money itself, about who controls it, and how it impacts our lives.
Precisely. And that's a conversation worth having, regardless of where you stand on Bitcoin itself.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From Bitcoin's, wild price swings and institutional adoption to its potential impact on things like inflation and the future of finance. But there's still one more piece of the puzzle I want to explore, how this all ties back to the 2024 election here in the U.S. We'll be right back after a quick break. And we're back. All right, so we were talking about the 2024 election before the break and how this whole Bitcoin thing kind of ties into it. But I feel like we need to rewind a bit because earlier we said that Bitcoin is like decentralized. So no single government, no matter how much they love it or hate it, can really control it, right?
Exactly. That's one of the key features of Bitcoin. It's designed to be resistant to censorship or control by any single entity.
Okay, so then why are we even bringing up the election? Like, if it doesn't really matter who wins, why does it matter?
Because it's not just about what impact the election will have on Bitcoin. It's about what the interest in Bitcoin, especially during an election year, tells us about the mood of the people.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more.
Think about it. Why are we even talking about Bitcoin as a potential safe haven from inflation? Why are we talking about it as a way to move money outside the traditional systems?
Because those systems feel a little shaky right now.
Yeah.
Like everyone's worried about the economy, the value of the dollar, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Whether intentionally or not, Bitcoin has become this symbol of distrust in those very systems. So when we see all this interest in Bitcoin, especially during an election year, it's like a signal flare going up saying, hey, we're looking for alternatives here.
So it's less about Bitcoin being directly affected by who wins and more about what that interest in Bitcoin represents, about how people feel about, like, the direction things are going.
Exactly. It's like a barometer for the public's confidence in the existing financial system.
Wow. Okay, so even if you're someone who's never even considered buying Bitcoin.
This all matters because it gives us this glimpse into these larger social and political trends. It's about anxieties about the future and a desire for something different.
So to bring it all back to our listener who, depending on who they are, might be sitting on a pile of Bitcoin or haven't bought a single Satoshi, why does this all matter to them?
Because even if you never buy a single Bitcoin, the increasing acceptance of it, driven by big institutional money, real-world experiments like in El Salvador, and yes, even those election year anxieties, has the potential to completely reshape the financial landscape as we know it.
So what you're saying is this isn't just about some techie thing some people are into. This is about a potential fundamental change in how we think about money itself, who controls it, how it impacts our lives, everything.
Exactly. And that's a conversation worth having, no matter where you personally stand on Bitcoin.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bitcoin. We've explored those bold predictions, the wave of institutional money, the global implications. Like, wow, it's a lot. But as always, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
If this conversation has piqued your interest even a little, I encourage you to do your own research, ask your own questions, and come to your own conclusions.
Because in a world where the only constant is change, understanding the forces shaping our future is more important than ever, especially when it comes to something as, I don't know, potentially game-changing as Bitcoin.
So, as we leave you to ponder all of this, consider this. If this trend continues, if more and more institutions treat Bitcoin as a legitimate asset, what will that mean for the future of finance as we know it? What will it mean for you?
Ooh, good question. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.